Mrs. Cammy Roffe.
Thank you. Well, first off, I was not quite in Nigeria. I was next door. But I want to talk a little bit about Nigeria as a country. I put it, the idea, the theme sort of for today is how did it get here? How is it a modern country today? Where did it come from, et cetera? The quote sort of comes from an old Talking Heads song, which most of you probably have no idea who Talking Heads were, but it was sort of this funny little voice, how did I get here type of thing. So it's sort of a theme on that. So I want to start with a quick little sort of cultural thing. So I need a volunteer. Okay, Todd, come on down. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about greetings and the importance of greeting people, sort of the difference. So if I am, hello gentlemen, if I'm in the United States and I see Tot, I might say, hey Tot, how are you? I need you to come over and start working on your paper with me, start doing some extra help, et cetera, et cetera. Reboot, I'm in Nigeria, I'm walking down the street. Ah, Tot, how are you?
I'm good, how about you?
Great, thank you. How's your family?
They're doing well.
How's your mom in California?
My mom's doing great.
And your sister in Boston?
Oh, she's doing
And your
well.
brother?
Him too.
Oh, great. Well, I'm wondering if you can come and do some extra help.
Okay.
So, when you start thinking about cultural differences and you start, thank you, I'm done. When you start talking about cultural differences, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of differences, but there's a lot of similarities. In many African societies, greeting is important. Being polite is really important. So I want to start also with, sort of jump around a little bit. What do we know about Nigeria? So what do you guys know about Nigeria? What can you tell me? I know a number of you have been in SWA with me. What can you tell me about Nigeria? Anything. Can we get 10 things as a group? You guys have been reading. You can know nothing?
It's in Western Africa.
It's in Western Africa. Good, that's one. Most populous country in Africa. What else do we know? Do we know anything? Mr. Potter.
English is the official language.
English is the official language. What else do we know? Come on, SWAT people. You've been there. We talked about it.
Oil.
What'd you say?
Oil.
There's oil. Okay. What else? What's it like? Christian.
20% of the roads are paved.
Ooh, that was it. Well, in some places, yes, but 20% of the roads, which is not a lot. What else do we know? What else is your preconceived ideas about what is it like there? I mean, if you ask a lot of different people, you're going to get a lot of different stories. If you've asked somebody, yeah, Tristan.
It's more modern.
It is more modern than we think. Okay. What else?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, we looked at pictures in class and the city.
The cities are big. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? I lost track of counting. We're getting close to 10. All right, so I want to just sort of backtrack for a second and tell you my story. I'm not an expert on Africa by any stretch of the imagination. I spent 2 years right after college living in the Peace Corps, or living in Burkina Faso, working in the Peace Corps, which is a U.S. government-sponsored thing where you go and you volunteer to do jobs that need to be done in a foreign country. And I was in a little West African country. I taught science in French in a rural school. Prior to the year that I was there, my town did not have a high school. So my first year teaching was a year when the school was newly opened. The literacy rate in Burkina at the time was about 17%. So what does literacy rate actually mean? You guys who took SWA and we did some of the statistics, what does that actually mean?
Percent of people who can read and write.
Yeah, percent of people who can read and write by the age of 15. Okay, so in Burkina back then it was about 17%. Things have improved, but they didn't have any way of improving their teachers, et cetera, or getting teachers, et cetera. But since my time there, and these are some pictures of me there, hair done, which was a big social activity. These were, and this is, you know, the old form of selfies. I would take a self picture and send the film home to my parents to get them developed. You know, Mom and Dad, I'm still alive. I was there long ago, before cell phones, before internet. So mail would take about 6 weeks to get from home to me and back and forth. So, you know, if I was having a really rotten day, I might write a letter to my parents, and 6 weeks later I might get a nice letter from my parents saying, oh, it's great, no worries about it. And I'd be like, what are they talking about? But, you know, in today's world, it's very different. And so as a result of being over there, Africa sort of got under my skin. You know, you hear a lot of stories of violence. You hear a lot of corruption, the blood diamonds and all of that. But it's an amazing place. It's vibrant. It's incredibly diverse. And the people are the backbone, the wonderful people. There's a real sense of peace and spirit that I've never seen anywhere else. And so since then, I've continued to read, continued to learn. I teach the SWA class as a result of some of that. So next, all right, we're going to change gears. Let's see if this will run. Cross your fingers, guys. This is a tourism video.
Welcome to Nigeria, a fascinating country. Take a trip through one of the most beautiful places on earth. A journey of discovery. A unique opportunity to get in touch with unspoiled nature. Enjoy your time in a place that offers something for everyone. A land of beautiful contrasts. An experience you won't forget.
Bless you.
Enjoy. Relax. Explore. Discover. Fascinating Nigeria.
There's just another minute.
Located on the western shores of Africa, Nigeria is a welcoming country which promises a fascinating experience for everyone. Welcome to Abuja, the capital of the country. Here you will discover Nigeria's religious and cultural diversity, while enjoying the many international hotels offering first-rate hospitality and top-of-the-class business facilities. Step into the exciting city of Lagos, a place where tradition and modernity come together.
So this is where your book takes place.
Africa's own Big Apple, the city is home to luxurious hotels and some of the best shops and restaurants in the country. Enjoy the unique nightlife and thriving music scene of one of the most vibrant cities on earth. Rediscover relaxation in Nigeria's southern state of Akwa Ibom.
Okay, so that is a different, we're moving on. Wait, I got to go back to where I want to be. Okay, so how does that video fit our image of what we think of as Africa? Is it a little different? Mrs. Dreek is laughing over here. Yeah.
Well, I have to admit that, in my class, early on, I went right away to Lagos, and we had photos of it, and I have to say I was actually surprised because I fall guilty to the stereotypical view of what I would expect Africa to be, and it reminds me that I should never, ever really monitor myself at any kind of a stereotypical outlook on anything.
Right.
It was very surprising. And this video was even better.
Yeah, well, this is a tourism video. This is a video that's designed to suck us in and say, ooh, I want to go there. Yes?
That's what I was exactly about to say. I feel like we can't really take Nigeria for what it is based on that video because that's like, that's advertising.
It is.
They're trying to get us to go there. So.
They're trying to raise money by using us to go there.
Exactly. They're not going to show the negatives of the country.
No. And so, Nigeria, as in most of Africa, is a series of dichotomies. There's the very wealthy, but there's a lot of poor. There is this modern infrastructure, these modern cities, but then there is abject poverty. And what we see and what we sort of assume Africa looked like 100 years ago, many parts of it are still that way today. And so, I wanted to show this just to give you guys a different view or to sort of just spark us. So let's talk a little bit about Africa, about Nigeria as a whole. So you guys probably know that Nigeria is found here. It's in a tropical region. Here it is blown up. Lagos is down here on the coast. Lagos was the original capital. It was sort of the center where the British were when they were colonized. And Abuja up here is the modern capital. Now, it was a planned city. It was a city that was not there 30 years ago. And in the 1980s, they really developed it, built it, and by 1991, it became the official capital. But prior to that, in Lagos, down here, is still the most populous city in Nigeria. In terms of how big it is, I'm a science person, I have to give some of this kind of stuff. Its total population is about 175 million people. It's about twice the size of California. So if here's Nigeria superimposed in the United States, it gives you an idea of size. The U.S.'s population is about 316 million. So its population density is much greater than we are. Lagos, again, has about 10 million people. So the lion's share of the people are living in the capital. A few other statistics. Life expectancy. So when you're born, if you were to be born in Nigeria, you're expected to live about 52 and a half years, which doesn't bode well for some of us teachers. And that actually has come up in the last couple of years. The fertility rate is 5.3. What is fertility rate? So we have that number up there. What do you think that means? Successful, not necessarily even successful birth, but on average, every woman in Nigeria has over 5 children. On average, when you think about that. Now, that means some have less, but some have tremendous a lot more. And I didn't put, there's tons of statistics you can look at that, but infant mortality is fairly high. Literacy rate in Nigeria today, males, it's about 72%. Females, it's about 50%. So half of you girls would not be here. You would be, working, married, etc. Boys, it's a little bit higher. And education is not free in Nigeria. It actually costs money to go for books and clothes, etc., uniforms. So if you can only send one person, your family tends to send the boys and not the girls. This is a population statistics, how many people are at what age. This is Nigeria. This is the United States. What's different? What do you see about that? What do you notice? What's the big difference? This is old, this is young. Old, young. Do we notice anything?
We live longer.
We live longer. Yep, Katie?
More old people in the United States.
There's more old people in the United States. Well, our life expectancy is in the high 70s. Okay, so that's expected. But what does that mean for the future? This doesn't give us numbers. It's just giving us the breakdown in where everybody is. So what does that mean for the future, for population? Does it mean anything? US versus Nigeria. You said there's a lot more old people. What do young people do in their 20s, 30s, numbers-wise? Stefan?
Work.
Work. What else? That's when babies come. That's when people have their children. So when we think about future, they have a huge population that's moving in to the population, ready to start having children. They already have a high fertility rate, so they're looking at huge growth. I meant to do this, but I didn't get there. But when I was in Burkina Faso in the 80s, the population was about 7 million. Today, 25, 30 years later, the population is almost 20 million. So these places are growing unbelievably quickly, and that puts such stress, et cetera, on infrastructure. Okay, ethnic groups. And again, this is sort of getting to how does Nigeria, what are some of the struggles that Nigeria has today? Nigeria has over 250 different ethnic groups, the entire country, twice the size of California. In the northern region, there's the Hausa and the Fulani. They make up the largest group, and those groups are not just located in Nigeria. There are some that are in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Benin, in Togo, etc. But about roughly a third of the people in Nigeria are Hausa or Fulani. Yoruba is about 21%, and Igbo, which is again the tribe that your book talks about, is 18%, and Ija is 10%. There are over 500 dialects of that. So each tribe has subdivisions of their tribal languages, etc. Think about 500 different languages. In terms of religious, and this again leads to some of our issues that we'll see later on, about half of the country is Muslim, and primarily the Hausa and the Fulani are your Muslims. So up north is going to be much more Muslim. Christian are the Igbo nations down in here. And then indigenous beliefs, which was what obviously it all was originally, are the Yoruba down in here. And again, each tribe is going to have divisions of it. They're going to be changed. They're not the pure religions that we see today. And so religious strife anywhere in the world has always been a big problem. Talk a little bit about pre-colonial. These societies, you don't hear a lot about Africa in your history courses. You might hear about Egypt, but there were ancient kingdoms in this part of the world as big as anywhere else. There was one during the same time as the Mongolian Empire that rivaled in terms of size. And in Nigeria, there was complex rituals. It's a very patriarchal society, though. The men were the ones that were in power. And most of the leaders had this semi-divine, semi-godlike quality, and so that's why it was passed down generation to generation. There sort of became the ruling class and then everybody else. Lots of nepotism. What's nepotism?
When you favor your family.
Favor your family. So the rulers gave the best choice jobs to their families, their extended families, etc. The men's roles traditionally were rulers, obviously. They were the herders, the hunters, the warriors, the griots. Anybody know what a griot is? They are the historical bloggers. So again, your book talks a lot about blogging and storytelling and all of that. The griots were historically the historians of the area. Now, most of these dialects did not have a written language, so nobody wrote down the history for thousands of years. And the history of each village, the history of each tribe was then passed down orally from one griot to the next griot to the next griot. And so at night people would sit around fires and talk about the history and the ancestors and all of that. Some of the men obviously are herders and farmers. In terms of women, traditionally, women's roles, they worked the fields. They cooked, they cleaned, they took care of children. Women did not have a major role in their society. You know, for me to be up here talking to you, as an older woman, you start to get a little bit more status. Grandmothers had status, but not the young women. And so men really ruled, etc.
Is that a broom over there?
I think it's a horsetail. And so, you know, probably shooing flies.
Okay.
Or sometimes it is, these may be the wives and grandmothers and mothers of a leader. Sometimes that, you know, shows status symbol. Yeah, yeah.
They decided to have it in the photograph, so it must be something.
Yes, and this is a fairly old photo. I mean, again, I pulled a lot of these off of the internet, but this is, I think it was a Yoruba tribe, some of the older women. You know, and women, there's one, this lady looks fairly old. She's probably in her 40s, and most of the other women are the young women. Oh, actually, let me go back one. Sorry, I skipped over something. In terms of sort of the hierarchy of the ruling class back in pre-colonial time, each tribe would have had an overall king. And then there would be sub-chiefs. Each village would have a chief. And then each village would have a group of elders that would sort of mediate and do all of the sort of ruling, etc. And again, women were not part of that. Okay, colonial period, again, I'm going to go through fairly quickly. Colonial period in Africa, basically Africa was carved up. You guys hopefully studied a little bit of that in European history. 1800s really was when the colonials were in there, to about 1974 when the last colony went. And, you know, why did people go to Africa? Well, early on it was, some people like to say it was guts, God, and gold. They went in for exploring. I mean, the explorers back then were the superstars. They were the NBA players. They were the ones that went and they'd come back and they'd talk to everybody about going to exotic locations, etc. And missionaries went in, and this is when the Igbo became Christian during the colonial period. And then money, resources. And so, you know, Africa was carved up. You know, it started with trade alliances, moving on to being able to sort of set up a fort, then build some infrastructure, then move in with guns, and pretty soon the country war, the area was taken over. Berlin Conference. What's the Berlin Conference? What happened? Yes? Anna?
It's when all the great powers came together and they decided how they're going to divide Africa.
Mm-hmm. So basically they said, okay, I want this. You can have that one. We'll go over here. And it was so that they didn't go to war over Africa. And so Africa, the blue is, anybody know what's the blue? What country had blue? Which one? I can't hear you. France, thank you. What is the pinkish red? Britain. And this is a colonial map from about 1914. The light green, who lost all of theirs after World War I, that was Germany. What is the white? Not undiscovered, but never taken over. Those were the independent. Ethiopia and Liberia were the only two, and Liberia has another whole can of worms. That's another whole lecture. The yellow was, this light yellow was the Belgian Congo. Scary book if you ever want to read about colonialism is called King Leopold's Ghost. It's about King Leopold from Belgium going into the Congo and basically stealing all the goods for his own pocket. It's hacking hands. It's a horrific, yeah.
Could you show us Burkina Faso?
Yes, Burkina is this little country right here, landlocked. Here is Mali, here's Niger, here's Nigeria. So it's a little bitty country right about there. Okay. This purple was Portuguese. So, you know, Guinea-Bissau, Western Sahara, Angola, Mozambique, those guys were, that was Portuguese. And I think the light yellow, this yellow was Italy. And then this was, again, Germans. And then the German were divided up after World War I. So, Nigeria became independent October 1st, 1960. Pretty much that's when most of Africa became independent. So these are countries whose actual longevity is pretty short as a country. A picture of the flag, and flags do have meaning. So the green is for forest and natural wealth. The white is for peace and unity, which is interesting because they've had a pretty checkered history since they became independent. And so when we look at what's happened since 1960, in 1960, when the British left, and the British sort of, they ruled Nigeria, the way the British and the French ruled was very different. The British ruled sort of from afar. They kept the main sort of power structure in England, and then they sent a couple of head people to the country. And then the head people in Nigeria used a lot of the local people. And so to become one of those sort of rulers under the British, there was a lot of money, there was a lot of sort of, you know, wheeling and dealing to become sort of, in a sense, sell your soul to be, you know, become wealthy, to become the ruler in Nigeria. The French was very different. The French moved their whole family and sort of ruled from within their country. So when all these countries became independent in the 1960s, the British said, okay, you want to be independent? Basically, we're out of here. And they sort of left infrastructure, left everything. Whereas the French, more of them stayed because their families, these were people that for generations may have been in West Africa, stayed and helped with the transition. So first off, Nigeria had a coalition of tribal leaders sort of ran the country for a bit. 1965, they moved to elections. Pretty quickly, a series of military coup, civil war. 1966 through 79. 79, it returns to democracy. 1984, we have more military coups. Military takes over. And I think, when did your book takes place? Probably during this period, this is when she leaves and goes to America. So during the time of military rule. 1999, back to transitional government and elections. And the same president has been in. It's actually experienced its longest period of stability ever in its history. And so when you think about these countries, Nigeria or any West African country, when they became independent, they had to create a sense of unity. What makes someone a Nigerian? What did Juliet said? Yes, last week she said that, you know, their basic dislike of the government was the unifying force. In the United States, we often think of ourselves first as Americans. In Africa, it's often not backwards, but the other way. Family is your most important bond, then your clan, then your tribe, then your country. And so since the 1960s, these countries have had to create a sense of who they are. What does it mean to be Nigerian? What does it mean to be, you know, from that part of the world? You've got ethnic and religious differences. Who drew the borders for Nigeria? Who made Nigeria decide that Nigeria is where Nigeria is today? Who did that?
British.
The British and the French and the Germans and the Italians and everybody who carved up Africa. And they didn't look at dividing tribes up, putting two groups together that hate each other. And they've hated each other for thousands of years. We've got to get a unifying language. And so what did Mr. Potter say the official language of Nigeria is? English. Because you can't, who's going to get to choose which tribal language is more important than the other tribal language? You know, 500 different dialects. So English becomes, in the French West Africa, French is the main language. And so as a result, you have to figure out how to unify different groups. I'm going to go, how am I doing on time? Vegetation, I'm not going to go there. We just don't have a lot of time. I want to talk a little bit about houses. These are different. Obviously, this is more of our traditional house up in more rural areas, and then various different kinds of city dwellings. And a couple of things just to think about. One of the things that much of Africa struggles with is infrastructure. What is infrastructure? What's infrastructure? When you talk about infrastructure of a country or a city or a town. Yeah. Roads, buildings, electricity, running water. Good. If you look at these homes, just to give you some statistics, in Nigeria, 50% of the population has no connection to an electrical system. So 50% of the country is not using electricity on a day-to-day basis. And it is expensive. And what they do have for those other 50% is poor, it's outdated, half the time it's cutting off. So if you live in one of these big cities like Lagos, it's pretty hot and humid, your air conditioning doesn't work half the time. Running water, something that we take pretty much for granted around here. Nigeria, 54% of the population has access to improved water. What that means is they have pipes or they have a closed well or they can go and get a drink of water where they're not going to get sick from it. So 54% of the population has improved water sources. How about sanitation? 35% of the population has access to improved sanitation. Toilets, closed sewers, etc. So you see the Nigerian, when you go to visit, the tourist thing, you're going to have one set of rules, but when you go the other, it's not going to be. So just infrastructure, houses, etc., gives you a little different view. In terms of Lagos, it's an important port city. It is basically, though, in a swampy area, hot, humid, prone to flooding. It's sort of grown unwieldy over the time. It's, as I said, the former capital. Pictures. You guys probably saw some of this. Is the modern. We see this. You see ports. It's a beautiful location, roads, big high rises, etc. But it also is incredibly congested and polluted. Most of these cars, buses, trucks, mopeds, pedestrians, all on the streets. There's not a lot of emissions control, and so there's you have it's just unbelievably noisy, filthy, etc. And then you have this. You have open sewers. You have flooded areas. These are slums that have developed around cities. Why do people go to the city? Rural Africa, you have your own land, you grow your food. Why do people move to the city? Anywhere, not just in Africa.
I said to get away from this.
Well, that's in the city. But why? Yeah. Job opportunities. They don't want that. They don't think they're going to get that, but they end up with that when they move to the city. Job opportunities. They're hoping for a better life, and oftentimes not so much. Again, 70% of the population is below the poverty line. 70%. There's open markets, food, clothes, cloth, etc., and it's a barter system. These are not set prices. You don't go and look at a price and say, oh, it's $3 for that piece, that mango. You have to barter. And there's definitely a difference between, well, where I was, it was the Nasara, which means white person. So when I would ask to buy something, I would say, how much is that? And they'd give me a price that was about 4 times what the actual price was. And I'd say, no, not the Nasara price. What's the price of a mango for an African? And you go back and forth until you come on to a price. But it's interesting. It's just very different than the way we buy and sell things. Other pictures, not a lot of that's a dump. Somebody probably works there, picks through, finds recyclables, etc., and he's taking a bath from some water source. And hair braiding. Why, and you saw me with my hair braids earlier, what's the importance of hair braiding? Your book goes into a lot about the hair braiding and the importance of that. Why do they? Why do you braid hair? What does it tell us? Tristan?
It's like significant to their identity.
Okay, significant to identity. What else? What are traditional society? What do most people do in Africa traditionally? How do you live? Do you live in a big city traditionally?
It's like hot.
They what?
It's really hot.
It's really hot. You work the fields. Okay, it's labor intensive. Women's jobs, pretty much, traditionally, they would get up at the crack of dawn, maybe go get water, make food over an open fire, cook the food, clean the house, clean the clothes, go to the fields, work the fields, come back. They'd work pretty much from about 5 in the morning to 10 at night. Hair braiding, how long does it take to do that? 6 hours? Yeah. When my hair was done, had some of my students would come over and they would do it. It was about a 3-hour process, taking two or three girls working on my head the whole time. It's about a 3-hour, 6-hour process. What, if you can do that, what does that tell about you? Time. You have time. So that means you are wealthier. The more elaborate, the more wild. And then, most women are probably more like the top right. But then they have prizes for the coolest. They weave in different colors. Those guys up there are pretty wild. Okay, and the last thing that I just wanted to talk about very quickly is Nigeria's resources. This is a country that has the second largest economy in all of Africa. It has tremendous potential. It actually is an oil-based economy. But this is this is a political cartoon. What does this say about Africa's oil resources? Does it say anything? Say it louder, please.
It was all taken by Europeans.
It was all taken by Europeans. The Europeans are the ones that own the rights to the resources, and very little of it is left in Nigeria for the typical person. If we look at, it has a tremendous amount of oil production. These are in thousands of barrels of oil per year, or per day, excuse me. But as a result of having basically all your eggs in one basket, and most of that basket is leaving the country because it's owned by foreigners, it's rich supply but foreign owned. And so early on, BP, Shell, and many of the big oil companies came in and made deals with the wealthy, the government, the corrupt government. And as a result of that, the money flows out of the country. A few people got rich. Little is returned to the workers, and 95% of the economy is based on oil, which is a huge percentage. Some of the issues with it: illegal tapping. There are spills, and this is something we don't hear about. We were horrified by the Exxon Valdez oil spill in the 1980s. We were even more horrified by the BP oil spill down in Louisiana. That oil, the Deepwater Horizon, spilled 16 times more oil than any other oil spill previous in history. But in Nigeria, they have spills that are analogous to having an Exxon Valdez every year for 50 years. There's more oil that has been spilled in Nigeria than in the Deepwater Horizon. They estimate anywhere from 9 to 13 million barrels were spilled. Okay, each barrel is 42 gallons. Put that in context, the Exxon Valdez oil spill was 257,000 barrels, and the BP was 4.9 million barrels. So way less than what's that, and it's destroying this vast wetland, the Niger Delta. Per capita, what's per capita? What does that mean? If I say the per capita is $2,700. Income, the average amount of money a person makes in a year, $2,700. 70% of the people are below the poverty line, and 23% of the adults are unemployed. So, that's a lot of people. And so much of this is due to the political instability. You go back to the slide of what's happened since 1960. The government has overturned and overturned and overturned, and you have a new set of people in there. Corruption. Inadequate infrastructure, poor macroeconomic management. How do we do our resources? How do we make money? And all of those kinds of things. And as a result of that, Nigeria struggled. I'm going to actually, just some food. Juliet talked a little bit about food, varied food. These are sort of lots of starch, a little bit of vegetables, very little protein. As a visitor, you would always get the best pieces. And you don't use your left hand. Left hand is for sanitation, not eating. And that's important because you usually eat with a communal bowl, one hand in. So you always want, and when I was there, I'm left-handed. So when I would go to visitors, I would sit on my hand, yeah.
Okay, what's chin chin? Sorry, it just came up in the book recently. Chin chin, do you know what it is?
I don't know what chin chin is. It's probably, it looks a lot like in Burkina they had bean cakes. So they would take dried beans and they would pound them into a flour and then make like a donut out of them. I don't know if chin chin is exactly that. It looks a lot like what we would eat, and then you would eat it with like a spicy salsa type thing. A lot of spicy food. Fried plantains, awesome. If you've ever had fried plantains, really good. Again, gari or fufu, that is a real staple. Where I was, it was something called toe, where again they pound the grains into like a flour and boil it into like a thick mashed potatoes with a sauce and rice and stuff. Okay, and Oh, and I threw these in. This is a typical family in California, what they would eat in a week. And I chose California. There's one from like South Carolina, and there's one from Canada, and there's, you know, these are a cool website if you go and see these. I figured California may be a little healthier, but maybe not. And then this is a typical family, and it's Mali. It's not Nigeria because I couldn't find Nigeria. And this is rural. This is not the city. This is not that expensive. This is a typical family's food for a week in northern Mali. And you can notice there's not a lot of protein. There's lots of grain, lots of beans, lots of starch. Very different.
And the family's larger.
The family's a good deal larger, and it's an extended family. There still is polygamy. It's not outlawed. Women tend to live longer, and you know, men have 1, 2, 3, 4 wives, and you can only have wives if you can afford to keep them.
They did outlaw homosexuality. That's not
Yes, I did see that too. So, questions. I know I tried to give you guys a picture of what it's like. You guys have done a lot. You've been reading. Anything that you guys have questions on? Mac?
Well, in the book, she makes a big point about how in America, everyone seems to be like fatter compared to Nigeria. Did you notice, like transitioning back and forth, that you get less food in Nigeria?
Well, in Burkina, but it's a very different. It's all whole food where I was. So you know, if I wanted vegetables, I'd go to the market, and it was limited supply. Grains, I could get bread. But one of the things was too is that being fat is a sign of wealth as well. So like if I went on vacation and I came back, a lot of my coworkers and people would say, "Ah, tu as bien grossir, you've gotten fat," which, you know, in our society, that's like, no, we don't want to go there. But it meant, you know, you look good. You know, you've had some time down and you've relaxed. But again, there's no such, you can't buy in the rural, in the cities, it's expensive. You can buy potato chips and candy bars and all of that. But pretty much here, you're limited to what you have access to. And it's very different. When you want to get meat, you go to the butcher has the cow, the sheep, the pig, whatever, hanging up, and they chop off a piece and hand it to you. No paper, no plastic, no nothing. Here you go. Bob.
Can you go back to your title picture at the very beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's Lagos.
This is, I don't know, it's not more of a, it's not a question as much as an observation, but this is what I see. I mean, I see the city, the affluent city on one side of the river. I see the shanty town on this side of the river. And most of the characters from Americana seem to be on the river floating between the two worlds somehow, going in one direction or the other. And that's the real Nigeria from what I can tell. Do you agree?
I agree, and that's one of the reasons why I chose this picture, because it has the old and the new and the dichotomy of what's going on there.
If it's ever going to change, how's it going to change if what's in their DNA is family first, clan first, tribe first, before they even start thinking about that?
It's a difficult road, you know, and number one is they have to have sanitation, they have to have water, they have to have food before they can move on beyond that, because if you're living like this, you're just scraping by and you're doing whatever you can to survive, you know. And I think that is the real challenge of the continent of Africa, is how do we move beyond family and become united countries and democratic countries. And some are more successful than others. I mean, you hear about Liberia, which was a disaster area. And it's had a president since 2005, the same one, and it's moved. It's not there yet, but it's moved forward.
And if you go 100 miles inland, is it a totally different experience?
Yeah.
Totally different world?
Yep. And if you sit and you talk to Zim or Lulu or Fakrad, who are from Nigeria, if you talk to Karine, who's from Ghana, if you talk to Riley, who's lived in Kenya, if you talk to different people who've lived in different parts of Africa, you're going to get a very different story. My story and what I know is based on my experience there. But it's very, you know, again, I'm not an expert. This is based on what I've sort of gleaned over the years. But A Burkinabe is very different than a Nigerian. And even within Burkina, even with Nigeria, it's different from a Fulani and a Hausa down to the Igbo to the Yoruba, et cetera, and all the gradations in between. Anything else? We have time for maybe one more question. Or not. All right, well, thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.